There was a princess whose name was almost scrubbed from history. A girl born into a world of crowns and cathedrals, where every drop of blood was measured, guarded, and weighed against the fate of empires. Her cradle stood in marbled chambers lit by candlelight, yet even as lullabies echoed down the corridors, shadows gathered around her. The whispers began early. Attendants traded nervous glances when her skin, pale as porcelain, bloomed with sudden bruises, violet stains that spread like ink through fragile parchment. A simple fall, a scrape, a pinprick of the skin. Each one lingered too long, a mark that would not fade. And in a dynasty obsessed with the purity of its veins, these small wounds became omens, secrets too dangerous to name aloud. Her blood was both blessing and curse. It was the blood that secured thrones, the blood that made treaties, the blood that stretched across Europe like an invisible web binding royal houses together. But it was also a warning, a flaw hidden deep within, silent and merciless, a defect that could unravel the illusion of power and perfection. So the decision was made: silence. Her name was whispered less often, her likeness absent from official portraits, her presence omitted from the records that would tell the story of her family. To the world, she was vanishing even as she still lived, a daughter turned ghost, a princess already half erased. And yet her shadow lingers. In every sealed archive, in every blank space between royal births and deaths, there is the faint trace of someone meant to be forgotten. Why was she erased? What was so perilous about her blood that rulers preferred to blot her out rather than risk her truth becoming known? Here on Echoes of Time, we uncover the voices history tried to silence. If you want more hidden royal stories, consider subscribing, and if you'd rather not, tell us why in the comments. Your voice belongs in this conversation. She was born in the shadow of a throne, into a dynasty that measured worth in bloodlines and treaties. Her arrival was meant to be celebrated as a promise, another jewel in the crown of her family's legacy. In those first days, the court chroniclers wrote her name with flourish, the heralds announced her birth to the ringing of bells, and the empire counted her as part of its unbroken chain of succession. But beneath the gilded announcements, unease stirred. This child was no ordinary heir. Though she was swaddled in silk and guarded by servants who bowed at every breath, the expectations pressed upon her were immense. In her veins flowed the inheritance of empires, blood that had been preserved through centuries of intermarriage, blood that was expected to carry the throne into the future. And yet, from the beginning, her body betrayed her. What began as small curiosities, a bruise too dark, a cut that would not heal, became troubling patterns. The midwives whispered of strange fragility. A tumble in the nursery left her pale and faint for days. Her mother's worried glances were quickly hidden behind courtly smiles, while her father spoke of providence and strength, insisting that nothing was amiss. But servants who tended her cradle in the quiet of night saw the truth in her trembling hands. Her thin lips drained of color, her sudden fevers that rose and fell like storms. The dynasty could not afford weakness. A single rumor of imperfection could ripple outward, shaking alliances, weakening claims, emboldening rivals. So the truth was wrapped in silence. Doctors were instructed to record nothing unusual. Courtiers were ordered to speak of her only in vague terms. Even family letters glossed over her condition, replacing pain with hollow phrases of health and promise. Her place in the grand design of succession became uncertain. Officially, she remained in the line, a daughter of noble birth. Unofficially, she became a question mark, a figure hidden in plain sight. Some said her illness was only childhood frailty, something she would outgrow. Others knew better but kept their voices low, for to speak too freely was to court disgrace. And so, a secret life began, one where the weight of an empire pressed down upon a child whose body bore the marks of fragility, whose very existence threatened the illusion of dynastic perfection. Stories like this survive only because we keep remembering. The secret of the blood was not hers alone. It was an inheritance, a legacy written not in ink, but in the fragile threads of her veins. Across Europe's royal courts, behind jeweled crowns and gilded doors, whispered fears spoke of the same shadow. a weakness passed silently from parent to child, invisible until it revealed itself in sudden bruises, unstoppable bleeding, fevers that would not break. For centuries, royal blood had been preserved through marriage within its own circles. Kings and queens, cousins and uncles, nieces and nephews, their unions were not born of love but of strategy, designed to keep crowns from slipping and empires from fracturing. Yet with each intermarriage, the family tree twisted inward, narrowing, concentrating not only wealth and power, but also the hidden flaws of flesh. The purity they prized so dearly became a curse written into their very bodies. The princess embodied this paradox. She was the child of dynastic ambition, her pedigree carefully constructed to safeguard a throne. But she became the living reminder of what such ambition had cost. Her skin bore the truth in every bruise. Her blood, meant to be the purest expression of royal continuity, betrayed her family with every fragile drop. The doctors knew, though they spoke in hushed tones. Court physicians, summoned to examine her, recorded their findings in notes that would never see daylight. They wrote of clotting that never came, of injuries that spread beneath the skin like dark flowers. And when they suspected the truth, hemophilia, the so-called royal disease, their reports were locked away, buried in archives or destroyed by cautious hands. To name the condition aloud was to risk scandal that could travel across borders and topple alliances. The story of her blood was not unique. In the courts of Europe, others bore the same fate. In Britain, the descendants of Queen Victoria carried hemophilia into Spain and Russia. The Romanovs would one day watch their heir bleed from the same curse, his pain cloaked in prayers and desperation. In the Habsburg lands, whispers of genetic frailty became part of the empire's decline, as centuries of intermarriage left their mark on rulers and heirs alike. The erased princess was bound to this hidden lineage, another silent victim of choices made not by her but by generations before her. She was a chapter in a larger, unspoken history, a reminder that beneath the crowns and titles, royal flesh was as vulnerable as any other, sometimes even more so. If history's hidden truths matter to you, a quick subscribe helps us keep them alive. If you'd never subscribe, drop a comment telling us why. Your reasons are part of this story too. Behind the palace gates, her world narrowed to a handful of rooms. While her siblings ran through gardens, mounted horses, and smiled for the crowds on feast days, she remained behind curtains, her footsteps softened by rugs, her movements watched by cautious eyes. The dynasty called it protection. In truth, it was confinement. Every moment of her life was choreographed. Governesses hovered at her side. Tutors arrived and departed in silence. Lessons were designed not to exhaust her. Meals prepared with meticulous care. Every chair, every hallway inspected, so that no accident could leave a mark that might spread across her skin like ink on parchment. She was taught languages, scripture, the polite arts of conversation, but never allowed to test herself in the ways other children did. Even laughter, too loud and too long, was discouraged, as if joy itself might break her fragile frame. Her isolation grew more visible as the years passed. At official gatherings, her siblings stood before the people, while she remained in shadow. In the carefully staged portraits of the family, there was always a missing figure, a gap that no one spoke of, a daughter concealed as though she had never been born. The silence weighed on her. A child does not need words to understand she is different. She saw it in the eyes of her attendants, in the way her mother's smile faltered when another faint spell left her trembling, in the way her father avoided speaking of her in council. In her loneliness, she turned inward. Her notebooks, where fragments of her handwriting survive, reveal a mind aware of absence, of being unseen even in the heart of her own home. She compared herself to a shadow in a sunlit room, present yet untouchable, belonging but never acknowledged. For the courtiers, erasure was necessity. They told themselves they were protecting the throne, preserving the dignity of the family, preventing scandal that rivals could exploit. But beneath these justifications was something colder, the idea that she was not a daughter, not a sister, but an error to be managed, a story to be untold. On echoes of time, we believe every forgotten voice deserves to be heard. Erasure is a slow violence, and in the case of the forgotten princess, it was carried out with precision. Her absence was crafted as carefully as her presence had once been announced. The first step was the portraits. In royal households, paintings and later photographs were not simply decoration. They were propaganda, proof of lineage and vitality. Yet when the family posed before the artist's canvas, her chair was missing. When the brush moved across the surface, her likeness was never begun. In time, even sketches that had captured her childhood features were quietly destroyed. The archives followed. Records of her birth were thinned, references to her daily life reduced to vague notations or eliminated entirely. The careful genealogies that traced every royal cousin and every noble union began to leave her out. A missing name in a list, a blank line between brothers and sisters, small absences that, piece by piece, rendered her invisible. In public ceremonies, the narrative shifted. Speeches praised the strength of her brothers, the beauty of her sisters, the unity of the dynasty. Her story was not denied outright. It was simply never told. The motive was as transparent as it was ruthless. A dynasty that claimed divine right could not allow itself to be stained by hereditary weakness. In a world where rivals waited for cracks in the facade, admitting that a princess had been born with fragile blood was to hand enemies a weapon. Better, they thought, to pretend she had never existed than to allow her shadow to darken the throne. Yet total erasure is impossible. In the corners of the archives, faint traces linger. A letter written by a governess describing a sudden illness. A physician's note preserved by accident in a ledger. Rumors that slipped through palace walls and found their way into the diaries of visiting diplomats. Each fragment is a ghostly reminder that she was real, that she lived, and that the silence around her was deliberate. Her story is not unique. History is filled with figures who were smudged from the record, their lives deemed inconvenient, their voices too dangerous to remember. In ancient courts and medieval kingdoms, daughters, heirs, even entire branches of families disappeared from chronicles when their existence no longer served the narrative of power. The forgotten princess belongs to that long, haunting lineage of the erased. What remains of her story is not a tale of triumph but a mirror held to the cruelty of power. In the royal courts of Europe, truth was never as important as reputation. To preserve the illusion of strength, they were willing to sacrifice the memory of a child. Her blood became a symbol not of life, but of danger, a flaw that threatened dynastic pride. The obsession with perfect lineage demanded that she be hidden, even if that meant blotting her out of history itself. This is the true cost of bloodline worship. Generations of intermarriage built empires, but they also planted seeds of weakness. And when those seeds blossomed in the form of illness, frailty, or imperfection, the victims were not the rulers who designed the unions, but the children forced to bear their consequences. The princess became collateral in a system that valued crowns above humanity, silence above honesty, image above life. Her erasure is a reminder that history does not forget by accident. It forgets by design. Those who shaped the records chose whose names would be remembered and whose would vanish. Women, the sick, the inconvenient, they were most often the ones swept away, their lives reduced to shadows on the margins of official stories. Yet even silence cannot endure forever. The faint traces of her existence whisper louder than the archives intended. Each fragment recovered, each rumor revisited, restores her piece by piece. In remembering her, we confront the arrogance of power and the fragility of flesh, and we remind ourselves that truth, once spoken, cannot be erased again. The princess they erased may never reclaim her throne, but in remembering her, we break the silence that once condemned her. This was Echoes of Time. If you value restoring the forgotten voices of history, subscribe and join our community. If not, the comments are open. Tell us why you won't. Either way, your voice ensures that history is no longer erased.